I'm Henry Blake. Um, I think in relation to what to look out for with county lines, it's really interesting because I could say first and foremost, like, you know, additional phones. Um, you'd say, suddenly wearing clothes that you haven't bought the child or the parent hasn't bought the child, new shoes, etc., etc. But having spoken to quite a few parents across the UK, actually, not just in London, but having gone out of London to a number of areas and having met, whether it's even parents or uncles and aunties, family members, one of the big elements that keeps coming up in their sort of anecdotal sharing of their experiences is the behavior change, is this idea, and we touch on it in the film, where a child literally transforms before a parent or a carer's eyes. So it's not just the sort of the external, say, objects that can be big identifiers. It can be truancy, suddenly going missing or coming home later unexplained, a change in routine. But one of the things that keeps coming up, which I find really fascinating, and which I found really fascinating for the film, and which we bring alive in the film, is a sort of literal transformation of the child, where it's almost like I've had many parents say that their whole posture, the whole gait, the whole demeanor of the child completely morphs into something more aggressive, more confrontational, more volatile. There's new words that suddenly start coming into the child's life. They start using new terms, maybe new swear words, or new terms that otherwise the parent has never heard them use. Now, of course, it's difficult because if you're dealing with 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old children, there is a natural, adolescence can do a lot of this as well. So it's about being very discerning. But I think volatility is a big sign that a child is not feeling safe and or is experiencing a degree of pressure or coercion or even manipulation from an external source other than the carer or the parent. And there's often this belief historically with county lines cases that parents have lost control of their children and so were blamed very quickly. And I think one thing that we have to be very careful of is that, because it's not that the parent has lost control of the child, it's that control has been stripped from the parent by an external source that is posing to provide all the answers to the deficiencies in that young person's life, whether that be socioeconomic, emotional, psychological, or behavioral, And that external force is greater in its potency around fear, power, and control than the parent is. So it's not as simple and as binary as the parent has lost control of the child. It's that control has been taken from the parent and is now with an external source that plays on a different dynamic. It plays on fear, it plays on threats, it plays on coercion. And I think the tricky thing with grooming as well is that if you think, it's often, I feel, important to think of it from a child's perspective, because a child will not identify that process or that phase as they're being groomed. They will often identify it as positive, because the behavior will be presenting to them, the grooming behavior by the perpetrator will be often very positive. It's using flattery, it's using gifts, it's using invites to social circumstances that the child may not otherwise be included in. And it's saying, hey, come along, and then the flip side of that is, because I have done all of this for you, then I need you to do this. And so it's one of the great challenges of youth work in relation to, say, county lines and also domestic violence is bringing the child around to the idea that what is happening or what has happened to them is not okay. You know, it's actually saying, you realize that what has happened is not okay and you don't deserve this. And so it's shifting the perspective within the child so they understand that what they've experienced is not normal, not healthy, and that those external factors, like the perpetrators, do not have their best interests at heart. And that takes a lot of skill, and that can take time. And I think this whole discussion around grooming, often saying to a child, well, you've been groomed, it's not enough. You need to gently bring a child round to actually breaking that down, the dynamics and what has happened to them, and saying, okay, well, how did that feel? Well, initially it felt great because I was getting this and I was getting that and I was getting this. Okay. And then could you take me through what happened then? Or then I was asked to do this. Okay, well, could you see that those things are connected? That the indulgences that you've experienced are connected to the request and the pressure that you're being put under. And so it's about forming that detailed picture. But for parents, I think behavior is a massive thing, and it's very tricky because it's all within adolescence and that sort of natural process as well. But I do think that sort of unexplained missing episodes and suddenly a change in the child's routine, whether that they're coming home later, whether that they might be going to different social events, which seem maybe outside of the child's usual social activities. Also, a sudden lack of interest in what they have traditionally been interested in. So you see suddenly children who might show a great affinity for sports or for music or for art, suddenly they're not interested in that anymore, and they're just not engaging. It's all this attitudinal stuff the subtext of that can be there and might be just odd. Well, that's odd. And I think for parents, it's okay to speak to someone about that. Absolutely. To speak to the school, to speak to the local authority and just say, look, I just feel that something isn't right. You don't need to suddenly the young person doesn't suddenly need to have 3 phones. And, you don't need to be finding rail tickets and bus tickets or suddenly seeing cars outside the house. Because by that stage, they are being trafficked and probably quite further in. But it's that initial stage, which is so hard to spot. And speaking to many parents, it really is down to behavior. It's really down, hearing them tell me what they've told me, it's down to the behavior changes. It's down to the sudden lack of interest, and then the adoption of maybe, new language, introducing new things that seem surprising to that child's character. And often the transformation is about adopting a more volatile stance towards authority. And that obviously will play out with the parent immediately, because the parent is the most immediate figure. We should also say, children in care is a massive issue around county lines. Children who don't have parents and or carers, and the care home system currently is not regulated strong enough to protect those children from exploitation. That's county lines exploitation. That could be sexual exploitation as well. So there needs to be a lot of work there done And so it's not just speaking to parents and carers, it's also speaking to those professionals in those settings and local authority to say, to get a detailed picture of those children in those settings, because those settings are, I've had over the last 2-3 years, off the back of the short film and the feature film, I've had care homes contact us, I would say pretty consistently, like 2-3 times 6 months per 6 months, which is shocking. You know, it might seem like a small number, but actually care homes writing to me in Victoria saying we're being inundated with children being exploited. So that has to be acknowledged as well, you know. And of course that brings up Crest, Joe Kaluri, who I used to be a counsellor in Islington, sorry. He's wonderful. He's been talking about county lines for years, but he works for a Crest, who are a great, I think they're a charity or a think tank, really. And he's done an amazing report on the care home system and county lines, and how really the care home system and the lack of regulation and the sort of broken care home system is just funneling perfectly into the exploitation of vulnerable children within it. So really important to bring that up as well. But I hope that brings that. I mean, my message to parents and carers is, like, if you think something's wrong, you have every right to tell someone and to speak up about it. And the local authority has a responsibility, and the safeguarding professionals that are involved in your child's life have a responsibility now, certainly now in the culture that we live in, to listen to you and to hear you and go, okay, we need to take this seriously. County lines doesn't need to get larger for that to happen. We're there, you know? So it's just about telling adults who are responsible for children, you have every right to call at any stage, you know. But really it's about identifying that as early as possible, as hard as that can be sometimes, you know.